You're not lazy, you're overloaded. Viktor Frankl's hidden insight. What if I told you that what you've been calling laziness your whole life, what you've been ashamed of, but beaten yourself up for, maybe even been labeled for by others, isn't really laziness at all? What if it's something far deeper, far more human, and far more understandable than you've ever allowed yourself to believe? This video is not about productivity hacks or motivational speeches, but it's about a hidden truth that Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, neurologist, and psychiatrist, understood better than almost anyone else. A truth that's been quietly buried beneath our obsession with hustle, optimization, and the myth of endless energy. The truth is this: you're not lazy, you're overloaded. And once you see what that really means, your entire relationship with effort, energy, and meaning might just change forever. Let's begin with the image we all carry in our heads of what laziness looks like. Someone lying on the couch, scrolling endlessly through social media, procrastinating, avoiding hard work, ignoring responsibilities. We've all been there. But here's the problem: we stop at the image. We never ask why. We never ask, what is this person avoiding? What emotional weight are they carrying beneath the surface? And more importantly, we never ask, what is the load this person is living under that has made inactivity feel like the only available option?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Frankl believed that human beings are not primarily driven by pleasure, as Freud claimed, or by power, as Adler argued, but by meaning. He called this the will to meaning. And he said that when people cannot find meaning, when they are trapped in a situation that feels arbitrary, hopeless, or disconnected from purpose, they begin to experience what he called the existential vacuum. It's not that they don't want to act. It's that they've lost the why. And when the why collapses, so does the will. So when you're lying there, unable to bring yourself to start the task, it's not because you're weak. It's because the weight of meaningless effort has crushed your spirit. Maybe you've been working hard for years without ever feeling seen. Maybe you're surrounded by people who expect everything and appreciate nothing. Maybe every time you try to express your true self, you're told to be realistic or stay in your lane. That's not laziness. That's emotional and existential exhaustion. And here's where it gets even deeper. In our culture, we don't just experience overload from tasks, we experience overload from pressure. From the pressure to be productive every second, from the pressure to keep up with everyone else, from the pressure to be perfect, to be strong, to be on all the time. Your nervous system was not designed for this. Your soul was not designed for this. So when your body rebels, when it says, "No more, I'm shutting down," we label that rebellion as laziness. But what if it's actually wisdom? What if your inability to keep going isn't a character flaw, but a signal that something has gone deeply wrong with the way you're living? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you allowed yourself to rest without guilt? When was the last time you did something just because it lit you up inside, not because it looked good on a resume? When was the last time you let yourself be still, not to recharge for more work, but simply to exist, to breathe, to be human? If you can't remember, maybe that's the problem. Frankl discovered something astonishing in the concentration camps. They made unthinkable conditions. Those who survived weren't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who found meaning even there, a reason to live, a purpose beyond the suffering. Sometimes it was the hope of seeing a loved one again. Sometimes it was a manuscript they wanted to rewrite. Sometimes it was the belief that their suffering itself could mean something, could be turned into testimony, into legacy, into a voice that would outlive the silence. Now think about your life. You're not in a concentration camp, but maybe you're in a kind of spiritual prison. Maybe you wake up each day to obligations that feel hollow, to tasks that serve no greater purpose, to a routine that grinds away your soul one checkbox at a time. And when your body finally says, "I don't want to do this anymore," we call that lazy. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's the first honest reaction you've had in a long time. This is what Frankl meant when he said that modern society is not suffering from a lack of means, but from a lack of meaning. That we have endless tools, endless stimulation, endless content, and yet we're starving for purpose. And when we can't find that purpose, we collapse, not always physically, but emotionally, existentially. We start calling it burnout, or procrastination, or laziness. But underneath all those words is the same thing, a human soul overloaded with tasks and undernourished in meaning. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I'm just lazy," pause. Ask yourself, am I really lazy, or am I carrying too much that doesn't matter, and not enough that truly does? Because the answer to that question could change everything. The invisible weight, why your mind shuts down when your soul is starving. We live in a world obsessed with output. Everything is measured: likes, views, steps, tasks completed, hours worked, money earned. And yet, in the middle of all this measurement, we never stop to measure the invisible, the emotional weight, the spiritual fatigue, the quiet scream that builds inside when your life becomes a series of mechanical obligations, disconnected from anything that feels truly yours. And this is the paradox Viktor Frankl tried to show us. It's not that people don't want to work, it's that they can't work when their soul is starving. The mind shuts down not because it's weak, but because it's overloaded with meaninglessness. And no amount of caffeine, discipline, or motivational speeches can solve that. Let's think about this logically. If you were carrying a physical weight, say 200 pounds everywhere you went, and someone asked you why you couldn't sprint, would you say, "Because I'm lazy"? No, you'd say, "I'm carrying too much." But when the weight is emotional, when it's responsibilities you didn't choose, expectations you never agreed to, fears you inherited from your parents, unresolved guilt, internalized shame, we don't call that overload. We call it lack of willpower. That's not just inaccurate, it's cruel. Frankl understood that human beings need meaning like we need oxygen. Without it, we suffocate not immediately, but slowly and quietly. We wake up one day and realize we feel numb. We lose interest in the things we used to care about. We scroll endlessly not because we're lazy, but because our mind is searching desperately for something to matter. But nothing sticks, nothing satisfies. And so we go back to the loop: distraction, guilt, shame, collapse. And the shame is the worst part, because it doesn't just say, "You're tired." It says, "You're broken." But what if you're not broken? What if your system is working exactly the way it's supposed to? What if your mind is shutting down because your soul is trying to protect itself from collapse? That changes everything. Modern life puts us in a constant state of low-grade emergency. We're bombarded with stimulation but deprived of depth. We're told to be available 24/7, to produce endlessly, to optimize ourselves as if we were machines. But we're not machines, we're meaning-seeking creatures. And when life becomes too fragmented, when every action feels disconnected from a larger purpose, our internal systems rebel. They say, "I'm not doing this anymore." And we call that burnout. We call that procrastination. But what if it's your soul pulling the emergency brake? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt a deep yes in your body? Not just a task completed or a goal achieved, but a moment where your entire being said, "This matters." And that feeling is rare, not because we don't want it, but because our lives aren't designed to make space for it. We're always rushing to the next thing. And in the process, we miss the thing, the one thing that gives energy to everything else, meaning. Frankl found that even in Auschwitz, people who could find meaning even in suffering had a reason to keep going. And here we are, in the comfort of modern life, drowning in conveniences but starving for conviction. And we wonder why we feel exhausted. It's not because we're doing too little. It's because we're doing too much of what doesn't nourish us and not enough of what does. There is a weight you are carrying right now that no one can see. The weight of expectations. The weight of pretending to be okay. The weight of wondering if your life is actually going anywhere. And the more you ignore that weight, the heavier it becomes. Until one day you can't move. Not because you don't want to, but because your soul is tired of pretending. And that's where the healing begins, not in doing more, but in feeling more, in acknowledging that your exhaustion might not be a failure, but a signal, a sacred message from the deepest part of you saying, it's time to stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. It's time to stop performing and start aligning, because you're not lazy, you're overloaded. And the load isn't just time or tasks, it's meaninglessness. And when we remember that, we can begin the real work, not of pushing harder, but of lightening the load. The myth of motivation, why you don't need more discipline, you need a why. We live in a culture that worships discipline. You open any self-help book, scroll through social media, or listen to productivity gurus, and you'll hear the same mantra: you just need more motivation, more discipline, more grind. And if you're not succeeding, it's because you're not trying hard enough. You're not focused. You're not committed. But here's the truth that Viktor Frankl knew, and that most of us have forgotten. You don't need more motivation. You don't need to force yourself to do more. What you need is a why that's strong enough to make discipline almost unnecessary. Because when you're connected to something deeply meaningful, action becomes almost automatic. It pulls you rather than you having to push yourself. Think about it. When was the last time you did something hard, not because someone told you to, not because it was on your to-do list, but because you genuinely wanted to? Maybe it was staying up late working on a passion project. Maybe it was helping a friend in crisis. Maybe it was taking a risk that terrified you but felt undeniably right. In those moments, you didn't need to be told to be disciplined. You didn't need a calendar app, a checklist, or a motivational podcast. You were driven because the why was clear. You were willing to suffer, to sacrifice, to stretch yourself, not because you were superhuman, but because the thing you were doing felt worth it. Now contrast that with the average day for most people. You wake up already tired. Your calendar is full of things you're not excited about. You go through the motions. You try to stay focused. You beat yourself up for procrastinating. You promise to do better tomorrow, and by evening, you collapse mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's not because you're weak. It's because very little of what you're doing feels connected to your soul. Frankl said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." But this wasn't a theoretical statement. He was saying it as a man who watched others survive the concentration camps, not because they were tougher, but because they had a reason to live. He saw that people who could anchor themselves to a future goal, a loved one, a mission, anything that gave their suffering meaning, had a vastly higher chance of surviving. And the ones who lost that connection, they withered, not because they gave up in a moment of weakness, but because the soul cannot endure endless pain without a reason. That principle applies just as much to modern life. You don't need more time blocking or habit stacking. You need to ask, why am I doing any of this? Why am I pursuing this career? Why am I trying to be more productive? Why am I sacrificing so much for things I'm not even sure I want? If you can't answer that, if your life has become a series of tasks disconnected from personal meaning, then no amount of discipline will save you. Because the soul will always resist what feels empty. And here's where the cultural lie becomes dangerous. When we struggle to stay motivated, we blame ourselves. We think we're lazy, undisciplined, unfocused. But what if the truth is far more radical? What if your lack of motivation is not a personal failure, but a spiritual signal that you're chasing the wrong things? That you've inherited goals that were never truly yours? That you're climbing a ladder propped against the wrong wall? So ask yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid of failing? If I wasn't trying to impress anyone? If I wasn't trying to meet someone else's definition of success? What would I do if I let my inner voice speak louder than the noise of the world? That's your why, or at least the beginning of it. And once you find that, once you truly feel it in your bones, everything changes. You stop needing to get motivated. You stop relying on willpower to drag yourself forward. Because what pulls you is stronger than any discipline you could manufacture. It's rooted in desire, in truth, in meaning. Frankl didn't just teach us how to survive suffering. He taught us how to transcend it, not by avoiding pain, but by giving it purpose. And that's the answer to your burnout, your procrastination, your so-called laziness. But you don't need to push harder. You need to go deeper. Find your reason, find your why, and let that be the fire that moves you. Reclaiming yourself, how to redesign your life around meaning, not obligation. Most people don't consciously choose their lives. They wake up one day and realize they're living in a structure that was built by other people's expectations, parents, teachers, society, even social media influencers. The job you have, the goals you chase, the habits you try to install, they're often responses to a deep, unspoken pressure to be someone, to prove your worth, to become successful in a way that looks good from the outside. But what if the structure itself is the problem? What if the life you're trying to be disciplined within is fundamentally disconnected from who you really are? This is where Viktor Frankl's insight becomes revolutionary. He didn't just talk about surviving suffering, he talked about choosing meaning in every moment, even in suffering. He believed that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by the lack of meaning and direction within those circumstances. That means the real work is not to force ourselves to fit into the life we've accidentally built, but to rebuild that life from the inside out, with meaning as the blueprint. And that requires a radical shift. It means you stop asking, "What do I have to do today?" and start asking, "What matters most to me today?" It means stepping back from the to-do list and asking deeper questions. Why do I do what I do? Who am I becoming through these actions? Does this align with the person I want to be? Let's be honest, this isn't easy, because to redesign your life around meaning, you'll have to let some things go. You'll have to say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. You might disappoint people who've built expectations around who you're supposed to be. You might have to face fears you've been avoiding, like the fear of starting over or of not knowing exactly where you're going. But what's the alternative? To keep living a life that drains you? To keep calling yourself lazy while your soul quietly withers? But no, that's not who you are. You are not lazy. You are misaligned. You are someone whose inner compass is trying to point you toward a different path, one that requires more courage, but also offers more peace. And until you listen to that compass, no productivity system will save you. Because your energy doesn't come from discipline alone, it comes from alignment, from living in integrity with what you truly value. Frankl said, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." But that means even in suffering, even in confusion, you can still find direction if you're willing to stop performing and start listening. Listening to the voice inside you that knows what matters. That voice has been with you since the beginning, quietly whispering beneath all the noise, "This is who I am. This is what I care about. This is what I was made for." So here's your invitation. Take your life back, not through hustle, not through guilt, but through clarity. Sit with yourself. Ask the hard questions. Journal, walk, meditate, whatever helps you hear that voice again. Then begin, slowly, to reshape your days around it. Choose the projects that light you up. Spend time with people who nourish your spirit. Let go of the goals that feel hollow. Reclaim your time. Reclaim your attention. Reclaim yourself. Because in the end, the greatest tragedy is not that we fail to be productive. It's that we succeed at things that don't matter to us. Don't let that be your story. You're not lazy. You're overloaded with tasks, disconnected from your truth. But once you reconnect with that truth, everything changes. Energy returns. Clarity emerges. And life stops feeling like something you have to endure and starts feeling like something you get to create. So don't ask, "How can I do more?" Ask, "How can I do what matters?" That's the real question, and your answer to it is where your life truly begins.